Good morning, and welcome to the virtual worship service of the Unitarian Universalist Meeting House of Provincetown, where we affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and we encourage each other in our spiritual search for truth and meaning. My name is Ellen Anthony. I serve on the worship committee, and we are so glad you've joined us this week. Our minister, Rev. Kate, is on leave for the month of May. So for the next few weeks, we are revisiting some sermons from years past. This morning, we go back to October 2018 and a service called Fault Line. This was a poignant time in the life of our nation when the Me Too movement was finding its voice and the Kavanaugh hearings had just ended. The month before, Rev. Kate had swum in the open water swimming fundraiser called the Swim for Life, and she talks about both in this sermon. She writes, "I couldn't have known when I wrote this sermon that a few years later I would find myself standing on a shifting fault line in my own life, setting me off on a health journey that would call on all of the lessons of this worship service." She hopes revisiting these stories of healing and resilience might be useful to you too. And now, as I light a candle here in my home, I invite you to light a candle wherever you are. In this way, we can feel connected even when we are apart.
Please join with me as we affirm our covenant. Love is the spirit of this meeting house, and this is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Our prayer this morning is a mixture of the words of writer and activist Anne Lamott, my colleague Reverend Aaliyah Kemmler, and a few of my own. It can be good to be afraid when it mobilizes us to fight tooth and nail for what is right, when it pricks the balloon of our complacency, when it gets us back on our feet. A lot of us are both afraid and devoutly faithful at the same time. But what is true is that courage is just fear that has said its prayers. We can be afraid and brave at the same time, and praying helps. And by praying, I simply mean connecting with what is larger than us, with what we truly believe at the core, in the gut, in the heart, whether it is the God of our understanding, or the spirit of love and compassion, or just human decency and dignity that we believe in. To pray is just to steady ourselves. It is to ask for help from a deeper source, and to be reminded of this one important thing: we are not alone in this. We are not alone in anything. And so I invite you now into a time of silent prayer, each of us calling on that which we truly believe at our core, asking for that alchemy which turns fear into courage, asking for a deeper assurance that we are not alone.
The reading this morning is called Fault Line by Robbie Walsh. Did you ever think there might be a fault line passing underneath your living room? A place in which your life is lived in meeting and in separating, wondering and telling, unaware that just beneath you is the unseen seam of great plates that strain through time, and that your life, already spilling over the brim, could be invaded, sent off in a new direction, turned aside by forces you were warned about but never prepared for. Shelves could be spilled out, the level floor set at an angle, in some seconds shaking. You would have to take your losses, do whatever must be done next. When the great plates slip and the earth shivers and the flaw is seen to lie in what you trusted most, look not to more solidity, to weighty slabs of concrete poured, or strength of cantilevered beam to save the fractured order. Trust more the tensile strands of love that bend and stretch to hold you in the web of life that's often torn, but always healing. There's your strength. The shifting plates, the rest of earth, your room, your precious life, they all proceed from love. The ground on which we walk together.
There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all. I rest with this love. There is a love holding us. There's a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding us. We rest in this love. There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all. I rest in this love. I rest in this love. I rest in this love.
Juan Romero died this week. I don't know if you remember who that is. In 1968, Romero was the hotel busboy who cradled Robert Kennedy in his arms when he was shot at the Ambassador Hotel. Romero, an immigrant from Mexico, had met Kennedy the night before when he had delivered room service to him. And just a moment before he was shot, Kennedy, recognizing Romero, paused to shake his hand. Romero was 17 years old when that happened, and it changed his life forever. He spoke to StoryCorps earlier this year and recounted the events of that night. I kneeled down to him and I could see his lips moving, so I put my ear next to his lips and I heard him say, "Is everybody okay?" I said, "Yes, everybody's okay." I put my hand between the cold concrete and his head just to make him comfortable. I could feel a steady stream of blood coming through my fingers. I remember I had a rosary in my shirt pocket and I took it out, thinking that he would need it a lot more than me. I wrapped it around his right hand and then they wheeled him away. The photo of that moment, light illuminating the fallen senator's face, the young man crouched at his side, locked Romero into the public memory of the assassination. And it left him with an uncomfortable legacy. Letters addressed to the busboy began arriving at the Ambassador Hotel, including a couple of angry ones. One of them even went as far as to say that if he hadn't stopped to shake your hand, the senator would have been alive. So I should be ashamed of myself for being so selfish, he told StoryCorps. He said it had been a long 50 years. Los Angeles Times columnist Steve Lopez met with Romero a number of times over the years. Romero lived near San Jose and worked paving roads and driveways. Romero told Lopez that he wasn't perfect, but had tried to work hard and live according to the values that Kennedy had advocated. Maybe I don't have the tools to become a politician and change the laws, Romero said. But maybe I can help everyone understand there were people who tried to correct injustice. He told Lopez in 2015 that after many years of trying not to look at the photos of that night, he was finally able to face them once more. I saw a person in need, he wrote, and another person trying to help him. Romero traveled to Arlington National Cemetery in 2010 to visit Kennedy's grave. I felt like I needed to ask Kennedy to forgive me for not being able to stop those bullets from harming him, he told StoryCorps. He bought his first ever suit before the visit. When I wore that suit and I stood in front of his grave, I felt a little bit like that first day I met him. I felt important. I felt American. And I felt good. Did you ever think there might be a fault line passing underneath your living room? A space in which your life is lived in meeting and separating, wondering and telling, unaware that just beneath you is the unseen seam of great plates that strain through time, and that your life, already spilling over the brim, could be invaded, sent off in a new direction, turned aside by forces you were warned about but not prepared for. Shelves could be spilled out, the level floor set at an angle and some seconds shaking. You would have to take your losses, do whatever must be done next. Though perhaps we do not have a story as dramatic and public as Juan Romero, each of us have experienced those moments when the plates under us have shifted and our lives have been altered forever. When it has been left to us to assess our losses and do what must be done to move on. But it is not as simple as it sounds, moving on, especially with trauma. There are memories that are stored in our bodies that resurface unbidden. There is an unfathomably long timetable for healing. And there are misguided and even malicious people who interfere with our healing, sending letters saying that things were our fault, or responding to our trauma by telling us that it did not happen, or that we are not believable. Recovering and moving forward after a fault line has shifted in our lives is more difficult than regular change. And we know how much we love change to begin with. You know, in thinking about this week, my mind has been going back a lot to the swim for life. And I apologize to those of you who are bored of this topic. I know it's more interesting to the people who were involved in it than those who weren't. It's kind of like when you're in your late 20s and your friends all start having kids and all of a sudden they start talking at length about strollers and diapers, like those are interesting topics of conversation. But hang in there with me. I've been thinking about the Swim for Life Day, and particularly about the end of the swim. The waves were particularly rough that day, and so landing on shore at the end of an extremely difficult 1.4 miles was a blessing. But it also wasn't particularly clear how best to approach the finish line. You see, after a mile and a half of open water swimming and some pretty severe leg cramps, when I went to get out of the water, I couldn't stand up very well. It was a new experience for me. It was like my legs had been cut out from under me, and I'm beginning to see why that has become an expression that people use. Necessity determined my next move, which was to let other people hold me up for a while. And then the medical crew guided me to a chair on the beach and gave me one of those silvery tinfoil type blankets over my legs. They asked me some questions to properly assess if I might have hypothermia. But the water had really been quite warm that day, and I wasn't feeling cold at all. The thing is, hypothermia victims also don't feel that cold. So it's better to listen to the medical people about that. They were so kind, and they asked if I wanted water or hot tea. Again, I wasn't feeling cold at all, so hot tea didn't appeal, but I had ingested quite a bit of salt water from those choppy waves. So some fresh water sounded awesome, and they gave it to me. At this point, I could hear people cheering my name from the balcony above the beach. I had come out of the water several minutes before, so the assumption was that I'd be coming up the stairs any moment to be greeted by my family and the extremely supportive crowd. I could hear them chanting, actually, "Kate, Kate, Kate." The pressure was strong to get up and go up the stairs. But when I stood, there was that wobbly feeling again. I gave a little wave to my mom so that she knew I was okay, but I didn't end up going up those stairs for quite a while. Better to disappoint a crowd, I figured, than to fall on your face in front of one. I sat with Karen under the deck and drank my water. We talked quietly until my land legs came back. She helped me get my arms out of my wetsuit, which, as I have previously explained, you cannot do by yourself. And when I was feeling stronger, I did go up those stairs and greet the crowd. I looked around and took in the scene, and then I scanned the crowd for the faces of my family. And I went and I found my people. I think this experience has been coming to mind a lot this week because the course of events feels a little bit akin to what happens following trauma. And I realize that there is some ableism in this metaphor, and I apologize for that. Trauma takes our legs out from under us. After experiencing trauma, we can't walk in the world the same as we once did. Our usual muscles are not working. Our normal coping skills are not strong enough to get us through. Because of this, we might have to let others hold us up for a while, even though that is not something that we are accustomed to doing. But in the face of shock, it's important that we let whoever can keep us safe in that moment do so. And then it's important to let the professionals do their job. The medical folks or the psychologists or the therapists, we need to let them do the job that they were trained to do. They know more about hypothermia and trauma than we do. And it's their job to help. When the acute stage has passed, we have a little more agency, and we get to make some choices ourselves about what is going to help us. We get to choose water or tea, or chocolate, or Netflix, or journaling, or calling a friend. We get to choose things that make us feel a tiny bit better. And at this point, it's important not to be rushed into rejoining the world, into being all better, into getting over it. At this point, no matter how many people are chanting our name or calling us into our regularly scheduled lives, we need to take the time we need in the white plastic chair with a funny silver blanket in our laps. And if possible, it's nice to have a friend sit with us. Not the whole mob scene up on the deck, not all the people who would offer us support, but just one who is good at it. It's good to let someone in if you can, so that you are not alone. At this point, too, you try not to choose the things that will not help you, even if you are offered them. You try not to choose tea if what you need is water. You try not to choose alcohol, or overeating, or isolating, or lashing out. Things that will make you feel better for a second, but in the end, worse. You take your time to get your legs back, and then only when you're feeling ready do you climb the stairs back into society. And once there, you scan the crowd, and you look for your people, the ones you know are there for you. I chose this morning's topic and the reading for this morning over a month ago. I was at that time thinking of the everyday things that sometimes unglue our lives. Divorce, illness, the death of loved ones, the end of a cherished friendship. I could not have predicted at that time that in Indonesia this week there would be an earthquake and tsunami that killed more than 1,000 people. And then, to make matters worse, a volcano erupting as well. That the earth herself would be in upheaval, changing so many lives forever. Neither could I have predicted the fault line that has ruptured in this country. That the shelves of so many women's experiences would be spilled out for all of us to contend with. That the weighty slabs of justice would prove so undependable. In this moment, I am finding that it is not justice which has the power to save the fractured order. It is more the tensile strands of love that bend and stretch. And they are being stretched, aren't they? Friendships are being stretched, families are being stretched, communities and political parties are being tested by the great rifts occurring before our eyes. And I am reminded of the quote that I shared 2 years ago with you, which said, "Things are not getting worse. They are just getting uncovered. We must hold each other tight and continue to pull back the veil." I didn't know it then, but I now know that those beautiful and wise words are attributed to Adrienne Marie Brown, a Black feminist author and women's rights activist. I took solace this week in Brown's words and in her voice as I listened to her podcast, How to Survive the End of the World. In the wake of last week's hearing, she wrote, "I believe it is a victory that the attention of the nation was on the hearing, and that this brilliant woman stood in her dignity and told the truth. Now everyone has to face it. Those who listen to the testimony may not be transformed by Dr. Ford's dignity, but the landscape of this long war is changed by her advance, by this battle. The Me Too movement is opening up the closets of this country. When Dr. Ford tells her truth in her dignity, she is flanked by millions of survivors finding our voices. We shake and we cry and we rage and we battle through the day. We cast binding spells. We tell our stories again and for the first time. We are not passive observers, Brown says. We are survivors who have learned and are learning to alchemize our pain into futures that don't hurt our children's children. Our stories are our slingshots, and we are moving forward, and none of us move alone. We are growing from Me Too to We Too, and we hold each other up on days like this. I believe this is an apocalypse, Brown says, an end of a certain way of being in the world, and the beginning of something new. Take care of yourselves, she says. Take baths. Take your vitamins. Drink a lot of water. Replenish those places where the tears are coming from. Tell your story, or choose to let your story sit with you. Turn to your body workers and your healers. Make sure you are getting the support you need. You don't have to be quiet anymore. When the great plates slip and the earth shivers and the flaw is seen to lie in what you trusted most, look not to more solidity, to weighty slabs of concrete poured, or strength of cantilevered beam to save the fractured order. Trust more the tensile strands of love that bend and stretch to hold you in the web of life. May it be so for each of us. Amen, and blessed be.